Hey, this is Keith from Save the Rust. Today I'm going to introduce you to our frame straightening jig that we use to get Harley 45 frames straight again. So this is something I made from scratch. I had seen one picture, kind of a video on one fellow who did 45 frames, and I got a couple ideas off him, but the rest of it just came out of my head and the necessity and adaptation to straighten these frames. So one of the things I want to tell you first is, why are these frames bent? So if you look at a Harley 45 frame straight on, you're going to see that it's got a single down tube. So the single down tube, what it is it puts all the strength in one line. So you got your top tube, you got your top motor mount tube, and then you got your front tube that goes down to your bottom, to your engine cradle. So all those are running parallel. So there's a lot of strength in that parallel line, but it doesn't have offsetting tubing like a big twin where it has two tubes that come down at an angle. There's a lot of strength there because it's triangulated. So what I found is every frame, every 45 frame that I've owned or come across is bent. Some more than others, and all of them to the right. So you have to think that they didn't all get into accidents that caused this situation where the frame bends all the same way. So my theory is that when you have your wheel on the ground and it's planted onto the pavement or whatever, then you have a Harley 45 kickstand and it's rounded. It's just this big round curve. And then you have your kicker on this side. So over the last 80 years, as you're kicking it, or you're sitting on it or bouncing on it, whatever the case may be, I think with all that stress over 80 years, and you know, these things aren't easy to kick over, but if you got your knee on the bike or you're sitting on the bike, somehow kicking it, like what happens in my opinion is that it's stressing the frame because the tire isn't going to move. The kickstand being rounded will allow movement, and the back wheel's planted. So in a line, you're going to have two wheels that are planted, and the kickstand that will slide. So it's like taking a branch and you're trying to bend it in your hands, and it's really tough. But if you put your knee on it, it's very easy. It's like there's a pivot point. So that's how I kind of want to explain what I think has happened to these frames over the years, because I've done 6 or 8 of these frames on this table and they're all the same. They all veer off to the right. Some, like I say, some more than others. So getting back to the frame table, again, I built this out of necessity for myself because I had, at the time, I think I had 5 or 6 frames. So I've probably done actually 10 frames now that I think about it. But I had 6 frames and they all needed tweaking. And some of them you can really see. When I get to this frame, I'll show you how really easy it is to see it's bent. And some of them are very subtle and some are just extreme. So getting back to the frame table, so I think we have a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, I think it's 3/4 inch plate. This piece alone I think is about 300 pounds and very rigid. Made the mounting bracket, like the stand for it, and the whole purpose is just to be able to put a frame on here and then push and pull the neck so that you can, straighten it. The front brace has movable points where I can pull or push from. The second one also has it, but I never use that feature on it. But it can also be moved over about 4 inches. Again, it all depends on where I feel I have to straighten it. That I'll show you and explain it a lot more clearly once the frame is in the table. And then we have another perimeter frame here, and this will go, and it goes onto the seat post with this mount. So what happens is this will go in and that holds it. So let's get to this frame. I'm going to show you how it's bent. So here we are straight onto it, and I can see it's bent. It might be a little tougher for you, but if you look at the bottom of the neck in relative to the top, you're going to see how it's actually off to the right. Okay. Now, if I raise it up, kind of stand it up on end, this is really where it's apparent. So keep your eye on this point and then follow it up, and you can just see how much it's off. Like this whole plane here, this whole plane is kicked over. Hope you can see that. I'll show you how bent it is once it's in the frame jig. I have a couple tools and a laser level, and it's gonna be extremely apparent just how bad it is. But before we do that, one of the first things you gotta do is replace the seat post bushing. You see that movement? These are all wore out. Well, they should be after 80 years. So here we have a new seat post bushing from Colony. It goes on there, and you can see there's very little movement. And what is interesting is once I put this into the frame, sometimes I have to open it up with like a brake hone, because it's concaved in just enough so it's even tighter once I get it into the frame. So how I get the seat post bushings out, and I could take it to the shop and use the little air file, but I just take this and I just cut a couple of slots in here. I'll put 2 slots in it, and this doesn't take very long, a couple minutes, and because it is brass, and well, I'll cut 2 slots, because what happens is if you cut one, when it starts caving into itself, it just catches your saw blade. If you cut out 2, this piece will pop out, and then this just caves into itself and pop it out. It's really easy. So we'll take care of this in the next minute or 2, and I'll show you the next step. So I've pretty much cut through it, and take a punch and just between the 2 slots you cut, it'll just start peeling back. You see how it's peeling back here? Hopefully you can see that. It just peels back. That's it. Now, this should just pop right out. You can see how it's, there you go. That's how you get a seat post bushing out. So we'll clean this out, flip it over, and then I'll show you how we get the seat post bushing back in. So I've wiped it down, and what I do is I'll take a take a little brake hone, and I'll put it into this. And that's just going to ensure that, especially on the very edge here, that there's no burrs or anything. And it'll clean it out really well. It'll kind of chamfer this edge just very slightly so you can't see. You won't even notice it. But one of the things, I like to use these little files. They're metal cutting files. And I like to do it by hand because you have a lot of control. You'll notice there's no marks here where I cut. I've seen others where they've, go to replace a bushing, they don't want to take their time, and they just put this in there and they just go at it. And what happens is you end up cutting into this and it marks it up. This is what I do. Do whatever you want. But I don't leave any marks here. It takes a couple minutes longer, that's it. So now what we'll do, just give it one more quick wipe. Get a little bit clean. We'll see if this goes in nice right off the hop or not. So here's a C-post bushing. If you look, there's a chamfer more on one side than the other. So you want to take a look at it. I don't know if you can see this in the picture, but just on this side, there's a little bit of like a little chamfer, a little edge that they've taken off that point. So we'll put that in, and it's tight. You can see that. This is the piece I made that goes into my jig, that goes into the C-post bushing and holds it in place. You'll see it's marked up because a couple times after I've driven the bushing in, it's gotten stuck, and I've had to use a pipe wrench to get it out. So we'll see if I can avoid that this time. So you just want to drive it in nice and square. Make sure it still turns. I can see it going in. If I rotate it, there's hard spots, and so there's probably a little bit of a burr on my shaft here. So if you look, we're pretty close there. It'll bottom out where it needs to go. And it's a little bit stuck in there, and that's it. You hear when it was going in, it was a little bit of a thud, and now it's like a tang. It's like a really sharp. That's when it's bottomed out. You can really hear it. So I'll have to get the pipe wrench and unscrew it. Can't do it by hand now. Not the first time, and it won't be the last time. And that's it. Just needed just had a little spot. So there we have new C-post bushing. So this is for a buddy. This is a friend's bike, and he actually got into an accident something like 30 years ago, and ended up hitting some rocks. So that's why the frame is so bent. So we're going to help him out and let him put this bike back together and get back on the road. So one of the other things I had to do already at this point on this frame was repair this. This was all blown out by a torch. They probably had a C-post stuck in it, couldn't get it out. They just torched all this out and then was able to bash that C-post out. So I had to repair it. Now I just have to size it, because when I go to put it into the frame jig, it's going to fit on this point. This is the first point of contact for the frame. So the C-post tube just kind of drops in there at this angle. You can see I never did get around to adding more bracing. It didn't need it. It's very stable. This plate, I ended up using an old frame. It's down here. You can see, oh, hold on. So about, I guess 20 years ago now, I found this bottom section of a Harley 45 frame in a barn about, I don't know, 10 miles away. And I've always kept it. You never know what you're going to need it for. If you look at this 3-point position for the clutch cable, and you see the blocks, that's for the coil. This is a 48 and later bottom half of a frame. So I use this to kind of help build this jig. So what happens is, I'll put it right here. See how that just slides in? Really nice. And then you see how this point, it bolts in? You can put a bolt on this one. Then I have different positions for the transmission mounts. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what's interesting is, like I say, I've probably had about 10 frames in here. About half I can put this bolt in. The other half I can't. It's offset. So if I remember correctly, Harley had 2 foundries, 2 different companies that were making these. And I guess there was a variation in the position of this. Don't quote me on that, but I seem to remember something about that. But anyway, that's how I made that bottom section. Bolted it onto this frame table, and then we'll start. I'll start showing you how we put the frame in and go from there. So we managed to get the bottom of the C-post tube to the same diameter as this pin, and we're going to install the frame now. And just like that, it slides right into position, and it's already in a good spot. So at this point, we'll put some bolts into the transmission plate. We'll take a look again with that frame section that I used to make this jig. This bolt hole that's underneath the motor in the skid kind of plate area, it's offset. So we won't be able to put a bolt in that front position. So to give you a quick idea of just how bent some of the stuff is, or twisted, I got a laser level here, and it goes up the center all the way. And this actually is, at this point, is actually not too bad. I expected it to be a lot worse. But then you look at the neck, and you see how the neck is really off. Like in a short period of time, maybe 6 inches, it's off by a good 3/8 of an inch. So that's one reference point. I have a couple others I'm going to show you really quick, just so you have an idea what's going on. So I haven't, at this point, I haven't leveled the table perfectly. I've got a 4-foot level on the back motor mount, and you can see it's pretty good. I haven't tightened anything down. This is just to show you some reference points on how bent it is. So if you look at this line here, I know it's a little bit hard to see. You can see this horizontal plane here. You look at the one behind it, it's kind of parallel with it. And then you go up here. And I know it's hard to see, but you can see how high it is here and how low it is here. That neck is, at this point, it's literally bent like this. Like this whole point here is twisted this way. And that's, let's see, hopefully you can see that. So this is just a you know, a very crude way of looking at it. I got another way also that I'm going to show you in a second. But while we're at it, I just wanted to show you, we're at the back axle plates. And you see this point and this point, how this goes through here. And this one won't. I would have to bend this rod. So this is not uncommon. These all get bent. You can see this one is actually bent. It kind of curves in. This one also curves in a bit. This one it's because it's a larger hole that I can actually get that rod in. This one's a little tight, but it won't go into that point. You can see how much it's off. So there's gonna be some work that has to be done back here. I'm not sure if this gives you a better way of seeing it, but just look at that horizontal line here and you can see how it's twisted. And here's my last point of reference. This is actually how Harley shows you in the manual to measure. This is only part 1, but if you look at this in parallel with that frame tube, I'm trying to get it so you can see, but it's right off. You can really see it's bent. If I move the laser level, now watch the top here. I'm going to put it right to the edge. You see where it crosses? It's crossing down here. You can just see how it just veers right off to the right. Just if I can get it just right. I hope you can see this, but it just in reference to the down tube, just watch how it comes closer and then it just veers right off. I hope you can see that. This neck is really twisted. So hope you can see that. We're gonna try and get this frame back to a usable piece. Some of the other things you want to feel when you're doing this is you just want to kind of feel around and see where there's bends. You'll feel it on the material, like you might feel like a flat spot or a raised spot where it's kinked, because this is where it starts. So I'm going to leave it at that today. We'll do part 2 where we level the table and get the frame set up in the jig and squared in the jig. That's the word I was trying to get. And that's there's a bit of time and effort because there's a lot of shimming involved, and because you want to do it once, you want to do it right. And then what I'll tell you though is this first perimeter frame right here, that's what holds the neck in position and pulls it or pushes it. The second loop, that's going to be determined on its position if I feel that it's in the down tube or it's in the backbone. And then I'll move this over so it runs. So right now, if you look at my second perimeter frame, it's in line with this down tube here. So this is where I'll push and pull to get the neck bent over. If I feel it's more in this parallel, I'll move this over about 4 more inches. Then I push and pull off this point. Again, I'm not a professional. I don't know if there's anywhere you can go and actually take classes on this, on an old 45 frame at least. I did it out of necessity, and it's been working really well so far. One of the telltale signs that your frame is bent is when you put your motor in, the amount of shimming that you have to do in your front and back motor mount. The more shimming you have to do, the more possibility it's bent. Also, on my blue bike, I can guarantee you that the neck is bent, because once I started straightening frames, I kind of had a better idea of what was going on. And on my blue bike, the bars aren't bent, but they feel bent. Why? Because the neck is bent. So even when I'm going down the road, you can tell that neck is off a bit, and the one your let's say your left hand would be lower than your right because of how it's bent up. So the bars, you'll think the first thing you get on, oh, the bars are bent. No, it starts at your frame. So one day when we get that bike rebuilt, we'll put it on here and we'll straighten that frame. And I can feel it even going down the road. I can literally just tell that neck is bent. But follow along for part 2. And I hope to have the entire process of this frame done in the next week or so, and upload it so you can watch it and go from start to finish and see how we do this. So I hope you're going to find this interesting, how we do this, the process it takes, the attention to detail, and what to look out for. And again, thanks for following, thanks for subscribing, thanks for sharing our videos, and check out, we got some merch now online on our YouTube channel. And have a great day. This is Save the Rust. This is what we do. This is who we are.